Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are diving into something truly fascinating today. We're going to explore how an accidental technical malfunction literally reshaped music history and birthed an entirely new genre. We're talking about the power chord, the mighty Marshall stack, and the beautiful, incredibly loud accident that gave the world heavy metal.
Picture the scene. On one side of the musical universe, we have what we'll call the polite guest. This represents the clean, highly architectural jazz tones of the early electric guitar era. But on the other side, we have Breaking the Machine. This captures the rebellious mid-1960s desire to physically push amplifiers way past their intended limits to get clipping, distortion, and heavy riffs. It's essentially a tale of two completely different musical philosophies colliding.
Section 1. The polite guest. Guitars before the growl.
All right, to really understand this revolution, we have to transport ourselves back to an era when the electric guitar was treated like a well-behaved background instrument. There were strict rules back then. Amplifiers like the Fender Twin or the Vox AC30, they were brilliant engineering marvels, but they were designed for one specific purpose: keeping the signal as pristine and clean as possible. If an amplifier sound started to break up, it wasn't cool. It certainly wasn't a stylistic choice. It was considered a total technical failure. Basically, it was a sign that you had simply failed to operate your equipment correctly.
Section 2. Breaking the Machine. The Quest for Volume.
So, how exactly do we get from polite jazz to ground-shaking rock? Well, the demand from mid-1960s guitarists, most notably Pete Townshend of The Who, was pretty simple: more volume and more growl. He actually walked into a Handwell drum shop and complained to the owner, Jim Marshall, that the existing amps just weren't loud or aggressive enough. And Jim Marshall listened. Rather than telling him to turn it down, he responded by building his own custom amplifiers to meet that demand head-on.
Now, under the hood of those new custom amps was the rugged, analog reality of glowing vacuum tubes and incredibly delicate electrical components. When those early Marshall stacks were cranked all the way up to 10 to get that massive volume Townshend wanted, these delicate parts simply couldn't handle the sheer voltage. They were being pushed way, way beyond what the engineers had originally designed them to do.
And that electrical failure? It resulted in a phenomenon called clipping. Clipping is basically the squaring off of the peaks and valleys of a sound wave when a vacuum tube is pushed past its voltage capacity. Instead of smooth, rolling acoustic waves, the amp literally chops the tops and bottoms off the audio signal. That technical flaw created a massive, gritty, thick, and harmonically rich distortion that fundamentally changed the physics of songwriting forever.
Section 3. The Physics of Mud. Why Traditional Chords Failed.
Now here is the real intellectual twist of this explainer. What happens when you play a happy, complex C major chord through a heavily distorted Marshall stack? Seriously, imagine the sonic collision that occurs when you take a polite, multi-layered jazz chord, plug it in, and force it through a completely overdriven amplifier. The answer is absolute sonic chaos. You see, in a standard chord, you have a middle note called the third. It's the note that gives a chord its emotion, making it sound happy or sad. But under heavy distortion, the complex overtones of that third directly clash with the distorted harmonics of the amp. The result is just a muddy, dissonant mess. The distortion essentially destroyed the traditional chord, forcing guitarists to figure out a brand new way to play.
Section 4. The Perfect Ratio. Stripping the chord down.
So the crucial point is that to survive this brutal, high-gain environment, the music itself had to adapt to the machine. Guitarists figured out that if they stripped the chord down to its bare essentials, removing that problematic third and leaving just the root note and the perfect fifth, a mathematical marvel occurred. Because the frequency of a perfect fifth operates on a 3:2 ratio with the root and fifth notes lock into exactly the same harmonious interaction even when the signal is heavily distorted.
When you compare them, the difference is totally clear. Standard major chords, combining the root, third, and fifth, resulted in clashing mud under high volume. But the power chord, stripping it down to just the root and the fifth, resulted in complete sonic stability. Stripping away that troublesome third was the absolute key. It allowed songwriters to completely shift away from complex, delicate jazz progressions and build the heavy, stable, riff-based architecture of hard rock.
Section 5. Playing the Silence. From Harmony to Rhythm.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because the invention of the power chord didn't just change harmony, it entirely revolutionized rhythm as well. The Marshall stack provided an immense amount of sustain, which led to a brand new three-step technique. Step 1, harness that heavy sustain. Step 2, play the silence. Guitarists learned that by resting the palm of their hand heavily against the bridge, a technique we know as palm muting, they could physically choke that massive sound. And step 3, this physical choking creates the percussive chug. That aggressive rhythmic pulsing is literally the heartbeat that defines the heavy metal genre. Which brings us to a really profound takeaway. The Marshall stack didn't just amplify the music, it wrote it. Think about that for a second. The amplifier evolved from being a mere loudspeaker, a polite guest in the room, right, into a primary creative partner. Its physical limitations, its electronic flaws, and its distortion dictated the very notes, the specific chords, and the aggressive rhythms that musicians were forced to play. The failure of the machine became the very foundation of the music.
This was brought to you by Notes and Silences. Thank you for listening.